Okay, so I'm making this video because I want to talk a little bit about guns and my view on guns. It's going to be a little bit all over the place. I have a whole bunch of different things I want to say, but I will sort of come to a main point that I'm trying to make, which is sort of the where the disagreement is between pro-gun people and anti-gun people. I should say that I'm not terribly political. I'm not too involved in politics, but for what it's worth, when I am, I tend to be very liberal, very much democratic liberal in my politics. But when it comes to guns, I tend to be a lot more conservative in my approach. So I'm going to start real broad. It'd be really nice if we could live in a world where there was no guns. Uh, this hurts people terribly, so much that they often die. It cuts them into pieces, and then their blood comes out, and then they lose blood pressure and die. So it's pretty much a terrible thing. Um, if this were non-lethal, it wouldn't be as effective at stopping people or deterring attackers. There are non-lethal weapons that are sometimes very effective in their use, but other times they're very unreliable. It'd be really nice if phasers were real, like from the Star Trek series. Those always had like a setting you could stun or you could kill, and the stun setting it was just perfect. It would always just knock people out. That would be nice, but that doesn't seem to be a reality. So as far as other non-lethal weapons, tasers they don't penetrate very well. If you're wearing some amount of clothing, maybe a leather coat or something, it might not work. Pepper spray, you got to make sure it's pointed in the right direction. You can very easily hit yourself with it. Of course, you can shoot yourself with a gun as well, which would be arguably worse. But you spray a little bit and it's into the wind or something. A gust of wind blows and it goes in your own eyes. And there's all kinds of problems with non-lethal weapons, I guess, as well as lethal ones. But and what if you are under threat of a gun? What if someone walks in and looks like they might start shooting people? You know, are you going to fight them with pepper spray? I mean, obviously you're going to try not to fight them, but if it comes down to it, I would say it'd be better to potentially have access to something like this yourself. But basically, this is the most effective personal weapon when it comes to defending yourself or deterring an attack against yourself. And it levels the playing field between people of all different sizes and strengths. You know, maybe I could carry a baton with me or something, but that favors a big, strong man over like a small woman, for instance. The guy would be stronger with a baton if it came to having to defend yourself with that. Not so much so here. This is kind of levels the playing field. Um, and you could always, I suppose, you could always take this argument to be like, well, you could have a machine gun and tanks and nuclear bombs, and you can keep escalating, but that's not really relevant to like interactions between like people on like the people to people kind of personal level. Um, so we live in a world where the phrase "might makes right" kind of makes sense. Like, it's not very nice, but might makes right. Even down to a very basic natural level. When you're bigger and stronger, you can overtake and you can impose your will. Maybe that means you can catch and kill your food as an animal, or maybe the male lion eats first from the meat that arrives because he's the biggest and strongest, and no one's going to challenge him. Or if the lions are mating, he can pin down the lioness with his size, and maybe after the mating starts, she might not like that in the moment, but it doesn't matter because he's already on top of her and he's way huge. So in civilized human society, of course, we have rules and considerations, and we try to be more fair and inclusive and whatnot. We don't usually try to live by the might makes right attitude. But at the end of the day, though, there will still always be somebody who just doesn't care about any of that and wishes to do you harm. And you can count on them having a gun. It doesn't matter if it's legal or illegal, how they got it, or if it was hard to acquire, you can count on it. And if you don't have a gun, then your chances of surviving an altercation like that are lower. So I want to talk about arguments that are pro-gun control, that are against guns, because they make good points. There's good points to take away from all of them. But at the same time, I want to, I guess, kind of refute them somewhat in the process. So, first of all, the more guns there are, the more homicides there are, and gun deaths. Yes, this is true. I'm pretty sure there's statistics that show this. At least to a certain point, you can argue about correlation or other factors involving that, but generally, yes, and it just makes sense. But what about big cities? There's places that specifically went out of their way to ban guns. The two biggest ones that come to mind are Chicago and Washington, D.C. They still have terrible crime there. So, would it be worse if guns were allowed? Hard to say. Maybe it would, or maybe it would. Maybe there'd be no change, or maybe even possibly there would be a little bit less violent crime. That's kind of like the argument that the pro-gun people say. I'm not sure, but would there be times where innocent law-abiding citizens would be attacked and killed, whether that's with a gun or not, and then they were not able to defend themselves? Yes, definitely. And to me, that kind of thing matters a lot. Another point, more guns means more suicides. Yes, at least somewhat, I think. I think there's probably statistics that correlate that, or at least the suicides would be more successful. That is unfortunate, but oh well. The way to stop that, I think, would not be to focus on the guns. It would be to focus on helping people. Like, yes, by foregoing my rights, I can save someone's miserable life, but it's at the cost of foregoing my rights. So, to me, that's just not worth it. Another point, certain guns or certain attachments should be banned or controlled. This is a complicated issue with no easy answer. Yes, a semi-automatic rifle with a 30-round magazine is going to be more effective for use in, some kind of horrible massacre, if that's what you want to do, than a little handgun with 6 shots. Meanwhile, in a situation where I'd have to use a firearm to defend myself, in a situation like that, like someone was shooting up a place with a rifle and I happen to have this, I feel like something like this is adequate enough to defend myself with, even against someone with a semi-automatic rifle, at least in my opinion. So there may be something there. Like, I'm not saying nothing should be unregulated or banned, but basically, I'll come back to this. The Second Amendment of the United States is somewhat open for interpretation, which is where the trouble with it is. The thing is that it's designed this way because the Founding Fathers, as they're called, they realized that the future may be different than the current times for them, and that we would be applying the amendment as it makes sense, but it's open-ended and interpretable enough to cover most situations. So the amendment reads, "A militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." And the militia part is a very big and important part of that. But it's important to understand that a militia is just a gathering of citizens. Just how, to Christians, a church is a gathering of people and a community in its purest meaning. It's not just a physical building. So what is meant by militia is not some official governmental military force. A lot of people look at the National Guard and call that a militia, which it admittedly sort of is. I mean, it's definitely a militia. They provide the guns and everything else, so why do we need to keep and bear arms for ourselves at home? Well, the reason to keep and bear arms is to be able to defend yourself against any threat, foreign or domestic. This includes protecting your basic liberties against anyone who comes to take them by force. including the government. It goes back to the basic idea that guns are the most effective thing for imposing your will on others or keeping others from doing that to you. And so disarming the population makes that population powerless against those with guns. So it's the individual that needs to have access to adequate arms and be able to assemble with other individuals and to defend himself and or his community. And of course, this is where people love to point out that you can't stop an army that would come after you. What are you going to do when they point a tank at your house? And what, do you want to own a tank as well? Well, no, I don't want a tank to defend myself against the government's tank. Although I can see how you might logically arrive at that line of thought, but the army has huge machine guns and night vision and tons of disciplined troops working together, blah, blah, blah. And the thing is, this is still lethal force. Of course, if I was being assaulted by a squad of Marines, I'd stand little chance. But the situation, you got to look at the situation more realistically. If somehow our government is attacking us, who is doing the attacking? Is it Imperial stormtrooper clones? No, our own citizens make up the armed forces, and they wouldn't simply follow orders like brain-dead robots to kill their own families and communities. This would be a really complicated situation if you're trying to imagine how some sort of civil war would play out. But whatever the case, whoever decided to attack this nation at large in this kind of scenario that you might be envisioning, you have to realize the kind of difficulty that would be there for the attackers, considering the kind of armed resistance that would be possible here, where a large number of households own firearms. So again, that's kind of a broad thing to think about, but it's never as simple as people make it out to be when they argue about it. Sometimes insane people use guns. I'm not exactly sure what to do about that, besides making sure, however possible, to try and keep firearms out of the hands of mentally ill people. There's no easy answer for that. They may be just fine when they pass some kind of test, but then they may become insane. I don't know, but I don't think that taking away the majority of people's guns, again, is worth it. It's not the appropriate answer to keep the guns out of hands of a small amount of insane people or whatever. Well, you might say, if your family was killed by an insane person, you'd probably feel differently. You know what? Maybe, but probably not. I probably wouldn't, because I'm here right now rationalizing this. I no, I wouldn't, because I'm weighing the values of is it worth taking away something in order to gain something, in order to save some lives? And in my opinion, no. Another point, kids die all the time from guns in the home not being stored properly, them not having education, basically parents not doing their jobs. That's what it comes down to 99% of the time when kids hurt themselves, is lazy parents doing a bad job. And that's very unfortunate. Would more kids be dying, with more guns, with guns allowed? Yes, absolutely. And the thing is that, and all the other issues that I sort of talked about earlier, for the most part, these could be greatly reduced through proper education and proper care and whatnot, and just doing a good job. And will that happen, or is that just a pipe dream? Well, maybe, I don't know. But the point is, all the problems can be made much less problematic. It's possible, without just saying, well, you know what, just take away guns. Just take away guns, and then there is no problem. Well, that takes away a lot of other things. So now I want to talk about some of the things that I'm not impressed with regard to guns, and that I wish could be changed or to be made better. This was too easy to get. I went to the store, I showed my stuff, I filled out some paperwork. This took like 10-15 minutes, I don't know. Generally, I can't see what happened behind the scenes. The point is, there was no waiting period. I got this. I bought this in a half hour or less. I walked out of the store with this. Was there a background check? I don't know. I can't see what happened behind the scenes. There was just some minimal paperwork. I feel like there should be a registry for firearms. We register our cars. And, this seems like potentially more important to have registered than cars. But I guess I can understand where the conflict would be with regard to like registering. Oh, why would I register with this with the government when the government doesn't need to know I have this. This is what I use to protect myself from the government. If the government knows everyone who has guns, then again, this is the whole apocalyptic scenario where it's like, well, the government is going to come and take away our guns, and they're going to know exactly who has them because of the registry. Well, you know what? Maybe. I don't know. But the thing is, if enough people have guns, that's hardly a concern. Maybe, or how about this? Maybe require only certain weapons be registered, like a certain small size, handguns, basically, as well as maybe certain attachments should require specific registration, like if your magazine has more than 10 shots in it or something. But again, this could also be a murky gray area where it doesn't. There could be problems there as well, like figuring out where to draw the line, and maybe it's a slippery slope. I don't know, but all I know is I'm pretty sure this isn't registered somewhere. I mean, some kind of paperwork went through, some kind of background check happened, but I think this is just some gun that's out there somewhere. I don't think there's a proper registry for it, just like how my car is properly registered and can be identified and traced back. And for the most part, I think that's a good thing. Overall, I already kind of said this, but there needs to be more training and education. I'm not really impressed by the class that I took to get my concealed carry license. I don't want to talk too much about the details of it because I could make an enormous video all its own about that. But basically, a lot of the people that were there were very new to guns. I don't think anyone had. Everyone there was like, yeah, I shot it once on the range, but some of those people were so just skittish, and they were like, there were some practice guns up there, and they were handling them, and they were like, oh gosh, what does this do? Oh, okay, how do you do this? And it's like, you're here for a concealed carry license. I feel like there should also be like a introduction to handguns, and that should be its own class, and it would be much shorter. Whereas you should already be very comfortable, and you should know a lot of the basic stuff, I feel, if you're going to apply for a concealed carry license. And the class should mostly be about specifics about concealed carry, not like, oh, this is the slide, and this is the slide release, and this is called the trigger. It's like, no, I understand that there's certain minimum requirements that are required by the state to be met in this class, but that is not what should be taught in this class, I don't believe. Basically, I feel like I could teach a better class right now than what was taught there. I don't think it was all bad. I just want to say the teacher did touch on some very good, important things that I was impressed with. But so much of the things that I wanted to be talked about were not talked about or were overlooked in one way or another, that I feel like it was a miss. And I did not learn very much in that class, nor did I get very much practice in the meaningful ways. Yeah, we had some time on the range, put 100 rounds through this, but time on the range is so not the same as any kind of practical practice. For example, drawing this thing, practicing how to draw a weapon that's on your body somewhere reliably. That stuff was barely talked about, like not at all even. So I feel like I could teach a better class. Here's the thing, I'm not nearly as good of a target shooter as Chad Cleland. He is, among the best in the country or something, and their whole family has a huge tradition in shooting. But so what? So what if he's the best target shooter? That has nothing to do, almost nothing to do, with being able to successfully defend yourself and having the right mindset and practicing, thinking about how you would actually use something like this to defend yourself in a practical manner. That has so little to do with time on the range. That's just like, there's people that are the best at free throwing basketballs into a hoop, and they're almost never the same as good basketball players. Like, there's people that are way better than top NBA players at free throws, and those people are not good at basketball. because shooting a ball into a hoop when nothing is going on is just one small aspect in the game of basketball. Anyway, so that's my analogy. Point made. So, going back to sort of the picture at large, recently in the world, there's been an increase in terror attacks, or just maybe it's just the media coverage as far as some of the other shootings, but there seems to be an increase. ISIS, random shooting, religious extremism, and these are assaults that are meant to cause damage. In Paris, for example, the attacks were not hostage situations. They were just massacres. At first, when they were reporting that a concert had, they thought that people in the concert hall were taken hostage, but unfortunately, that was not the case. They were just shooting people. They just went to cause as much damage as they could, kill as many people as they could. France, by the way, is a place where guns are not allowed. Citizens are not allowed to own guns. Did that help them? Did that save anyone? How did the bad guys have guns then, if guns aren't allowed in France? Remember, those that are intent on doing harm will always bring guns, whether legal or not. Somehow they're going to get their guns. The only remotely smart thing that I've ever heard Donald Trump say, and this isn't exactly his words, I'm just going to paraphrase him, and I don't think he said it very well, but he said something like, yeah, well, imagine if Parisians were allowed to carry guns and some of them were armed, things could have been different. And he's right. And that guy's a complete idiot. I don't agree on anything he says, and God help us all if he somehow manages to even get the Republican nomination to run. That's going to be the end of the world. But that much I can agree with him on. Seriously though, imagine if 1 out of 20 people, or maybe 1 out of 50, or 1 out of 100 people had a firearm on them. And this is kind of, it was a concert, so I don't know, maybe they wouldn't allow that in there. Or maybe they would. Who knows? Let's just say 1 out of 100 people in the vicinity, maybe not just at the concert hall, because the terror attacks were in a bunch of separate, different areas. So maybe if somebody had them, of course people would have still died, but things could have been a little bit different. Maybe maybe less people would have died. So now, if you're one of the people that thinks that more people would have died because it would have just turned into the Wild West movie where Parisians are all just shooting guns everywhere, then you know what, that's stupid. I'm sorry. I can't directly disprove that, but I honestly believe that is not a reality. So these guys that attacked, they were just calmly shooting people, calmly reloading the next magazine, shooting people some more. They were completely unopposed, and they knew they would be unopposed. They knew it would take a while for actual armed response to arrive, and they had tons of time to just calmly shoot as many people as they could. And people's response is often to just get down on the floor as if it's a hostage situation, or just kind of crouch and try not to be threatening, or hide under a desk. And you just get shot in a situation like this. It's not a hostage scenario. They're not shooting people who are threats to them. They're just shooting whoever they can to cause as much damage, which is just horrible and disgusting. But that is what it is. That's the whole point. So, anti-gun people say that you couldn't use a weapon successfully in many scenarios, that it would require training and a lot of thought in advance. And there's a lot of examples of really sort of ignorant thinking. There's this video on YouTube. It's called something like, "Oh, concealed carry people are living in a dream world where what they think is completely wrong." And God, that video is so stupid. And there's so many examples of this, right? In the video, I'm just going to try to paraphrase it as quickly as I can. Basically, they set up a test where there's a classroom, and they use guns with paint bullets or rubber bullets or something. So everyone's wearing protective masks and chest things. And they set up a classroom full of people that are sitting around and a teacher. And eventually, at some point, at random in time, they do this with several people. At some point, a shooter walks in and just starts shooting people, and shoots the teacher, shoots someone else, and shoots the student, the one that's supposed to be the main person in the experiment that has a gun on them. And they always sit in the same place too, which is, anyway, the attacker always succeeds, and it's just such a fixed experiment. Of course they're going to succeed there's like 2 or 3 seconds to react. You know, obviously, if there's a sneak attack or a sucker punch, that person's going to win. Like this is not a guarantee of surviving anything. It's just that there are plenty of scenarios where, oh, you're instead of hiding under a desk in a dark room where the bad guy's about to go in, and check the room, you could actually defend yourself instead of hiding under a desk. I'll say this again. If there's a sneak attack, that person's going to win. Like if I kick down the door and point this gun at you and you're just like sitting there watching TV, yeah, I'm going to kill you. That's a no-brainer. Like I don't even understand what the argument is. Or how about this? You could be the world's best martial artist or boxer, and I'm just gonna like walk up behind you and like plant my elbow into your spine while you're busy having a conversation with someone else. Yeah, I'm going to win that fight. Oh, it's not a fight, but I'm going to win that fight, obviously. So that kind of argument is just ridiculous. When in reality, there's plenty of situations where it's possible to successfully defend yourself and others, and there is actually evidence of this. There's videos, there's compilations of videos of people successfully defending themselves. Those do tend to be a little bit just like anything. It's either pro-gun or anti-gun. It's very kind of biased one way or the other, So it's not like the purest evidence, but nevertheless, it's out there. There's footage of people successfully defending themselves. And this is my opportunity now. I want to do a quick rant about gun-free zones. So most shootings tend to happen in gun-free zones. That is, places where you're not allowed to have guns. English language is weird. Gun-free could also, by its definition, mean that like free for all, guns all over the place or something. No, but gun-free means no guns. There's a little sign that gets hung in front of the building, and they're absolutely everywhere around here. And I want you to tell me, I want somebody to tell me, anybody, what that is supposed to achieve. Like, what this sign is supposed to achieve. Is it going to stop someone who's committed to using a gun in there? Like, will it make them change their mind? If some person's like, I'm just going to shoot up my workplace, I'm sick of all my coworkers in this hospital or whatever, are they going to just be like, oh, wait, but I forgot, there's a sign, I can't do that, I'm not going to bring a gun in here? Like, the only people that are going to stop are the people that want to follow the law. And if you're going to shoot a bunch of people up, you probably don't care about the law. It's probably like the last thing you're going to do in this life, right? So, like, I guess if a law-abiding citizen can't bring his legal weapon in there, then there's zero chance of it accidentally discharging or something like that, right? So I guess that's good. I mean, literally, please tell me what this is supposed to achieve, these signs. So now I'm going to sort of make my main point. And it is just simply this. To me, my values mean that it's worth to accept the negatives that come with the positives. And your values, if you are anti-gun, mean that it's not worth it to accept those negatives. So for instance, I accept that more people will die from gun shootings in order to have the right to defend myself. I accept that there will be more suicides. I accept that more kids will die to guns. I don't like any of that. That's very unfortunate. And I think those things can be reduced through education, through common sense, through training. But nevertheless, it's still worth it to me to have this. Whereas for you, anti-gun person, I say the proverbial you, it's definitely not worth it. You just look at the statistics and you say, look at this, look at how many people will die every year. We could just remove those deaths by not having this. So I will forgo my right to defend myself. Chances are I'll never even have to defend myself, which is true and good. That's a good thing. So I'd rather save those lives. And that's fine. You know what I mean? These are sort of different values. I can't, I disagree because I like my values, but I can't say anything bad about what you're saying. I mean, that makes sense. Like statistically, that makes sense. So, in Paris, let me make an example. For example, if in Paris people were allowed to own guns, then probably they'd have a much, much higher yearly death toll. Like gun-related deaths every year would be huge. So much so that the amount of deaths every year would be higher than the amount of people that would be saved. Let's say if people were carrying during those attacks, and the attacks were cut short, and half the people that died didn't die because people intervened and stopped the shooters before they could kill more people. The amount of people that were saved would probably be less, possibly by a huge margin, than the amount of people that did die just by the fact that guns were allowed in the country. So an anti-gun person would just simply compare those numbers and be like, there's just no contest here. Like, look at how many more lives were lost simply by having guns. But here's the thing. It's not just a statistic. Or, there's a statistic like, hey, because I have this, I'm more likely to shoot myself or have something stupid or terrible happen, shoot my own family, than to have to defend myself or face some kind of terror attack. That's technically true on numbers. But here's the thing. I'm not a statistic, though. Like, obviously, that still applies to me. It applies to everyone. But I'm not a statistic. I'm consciously thinking about these things. I'm very aware. I'm very thoughtful and mindful, So my personal stake in that statistic, I would say, is lower. I don't think this is something I could prove or disprove, but I don't like simply going on statistics. Yeah, obviously more people would die overall, but again, I would forego my rights to the whole basic defense, to the whole equalizing of power, which I honestly believe in. So basically, there's this quote that is, it might be misattributed to Joseph Stalin. It says something like, "The death of one is a tragedy, the death of a million is a statistic." Or you can say 1,000 or whatever. You can make that say anything you want. Apparently, it's never confirmed that he actually said that. But basically, I refuse to be disarmed and powerless on a moral basis. And that, with it, comes with accepting certain negatives. And that's what I'm willing to do. So that's the main point. It's really obvious. I mean, there's nothing groundbreaking here. It's just, you got to be willing to acknowledge arguments from the opposite side, because there's definitely good points to be made there, and there could definitely use to be compromises, right? So I'm pro-gun, but I'm still pro-regulation and pro, there's certain things that need to be controlled and registered and blah blah blah. So there needs to be a healthy compromise. So now I want to talk about just a few little things that are my own personal sort of ideas with regard to this. It goes without saying, maybe I already did say this, I never want to have to shoot anyone. And hopefully it never will have to come down to that. And if I do have to shoot someone, I don't want them to die, which is kind of maybe weird, kind of hypocritical or something. But I think a lot of people have the wrong attitude. A lot of people, I've talked to people, friends of mine, that I get this feeling talking to them about this, that it's almost like they're kind of eager. They're kind of eager to use their gun, they're like, yeah, well, I hope he does try to rob me or something. I'm going to shoot him. It's like, that is such a terrible attitude, That needs to be fixed through some kind of education or something. I don't believe in that. Which is also the other thing, why this is a little 380. This is probably about the smallest caliber that you can have, that you would use for defense. And honestly, in my opinion, this is plenty enough. I don't think you need a giant wartime, man stopper round like a 357 or a 45, or there's even bigger things. I don't think there's any rules. Maybe there are state by state, but I don't think there's any rules that say you can't carry a giant 44 Magnum thing, or a 50 caliber Desert Eagle, or a 500 Smith and Wesson, something that's used for hunting. Just you can hunt giant game with it, or hunters will carry it on their hip to protect themselves in case a cougar suddenly is stalking them from the side, and they can protect themselves. But you can carry that stuff around with you and use it to shoot at people. I think that is absolutely absurd. This is enough. This is over 100 years or however long it's been around, lots of people have lost their lives to this 380 round. It's plenty good enough, and it's not gonna have quite the same stopping power. It might not put people down quite as hard, but honestly, like I said, I'd rather someone not entirely die. Although the opposite argument is, well, you're going to stop them more reliably with a big round, and I can see that, but like, I don't know. That's just my personal feel. I've never shot anyone. I've never been shot, but I'm just sort of going with my gut, going with what I know about from history and from feeling what this feels like going off. This does not feel like a little 22, tiny little thing. This feels like a real pop, a real bang. So I feel like this has a lot of energy in it, and it's plenty enough. Um, Other stuff that kind of bothers me about the pro gun culture, there's a lot of people that take it really way too far with paranoia. Uh, people that I have a friend who wears a bulletproof vest all the time, or at least used to. Doesn't live here anymore. I personally think that's going too far. Now, I will say he lived in a much worse neighborhood, a place where just him owning a gun kind of made more sense, and it was more important for him to have a gun, as well as, I guess, if it's bad enough, I guess you could wear a bulletproof vest. But overall, I found that attitude to be a little bit too much. Again, do what you want to do, I guess. That's your right. But there comes a certain point where, like, taking these things too far becomes a hindrance on your life. Like, I don't want to wear a vest. I mean, I guess in the winter it could be warm and nice or something, but like, it's heavy. It's more stuff to put on. It's pretty quickly that you can get to a point where, like, these things are just getting in the way of your life. And I guess it's up to everyone to personally find their own comfort level or compromise or whatever. There's people that have multiple guns, like, I got my car gun, and I got my gun in my living room, and then I got my gun in the nightstand, and I got my gun near the front door in case someone is knocking on my door. And it's like, that seems absolutely ridiculous. Again, maybe there's places that are that bad, that you need to do that, but if they are, then maybe your priority should not be to get 7 guns. Maybe the priority should be to get out of that place or try to fix that place if you're a caring community type person. Also, caring at all times. There's people that, like, when I go out, I will oftentimes have this on me. Not all times, maybe, but I don't usually carry this with me when I'm in the house, or there's just sometimes it just doesn't make sense to have this with me. And to be honest, where I live and work right now, it's kind of a nice part of town, so this is even less important. I mean, just got to be honest. Before, where I lived and worked was a little bit sketchier, so this was a little more important. But again, if there's people that are like, oh, I never go anywhere without having this on me. I think they only just take it off to shower, I guess, or something. And I think that's over the top, personally. And I mean, I guess that about covers it. I'm sure I forgot something, but I guess one more point I want to make. This isn't really about my personal stuff. This is more like just sort of a funny point that maybe kind of involves some hypocrisy or some, like, nonsensiveness. That's not a word, but some time ago, 100 years or so, more now, there were conventions between major European countries and certain other countries, like the Hague Convention and the Geneva Convention, or is it Hague? I don't know how to say it. But basically, some rules of war were agreed upon. And I think some of them, maybe even a lot of them, are good for what it's worth. Although just the whole idea of, like, agreeing on rules for war to make it nice there's something weird about that. Like, the whole concept of war is like, I disagree with you and I hate you so much that we're gonna fight till we're gonna, like, I'm gonna kill you, basically, which is not nice. Like, that is sort of like against the idea somewhere in my head of rules at all. But good stuff came out. Like, they decided not to use poison gas to attack each other, which is, I guess, definitely a plus, because of how terribly inhumane it is, and stuff like that was done in World War One. But I guess the main reason I want to talk about this is, well, a lot of the rules are very, like, hey, don't attack hospital ships that are marked clearly as hospital ships that are carrying wounded. Don't attack those. Don't capture people and like once they've given up, you can't just execute people. You have to take them as prisoners. Blah blah blah. Really good, but like kind of weird too if you think about it. But the main thing is like one of the rules says you're not allowed to use bullets that expanding bullets or something like that. I don't know what the exact wording is. And so this right here, this is a hollow point round. I'm not sure if this is going to show up on camera. Probably not. And this is what's considered a typical defense round here. But you couldn't use this in war. This kind of round, it mushrooms out and it expands. And a few things. So this wouldn't be as good at penetrating through cover or armor or anything like that. It would be worse. But against an unarmored target, this, in theory, would oftentimes wound harder. It would cause a more serious wound. It also would not penetrate as far. So basically, in a civilian scenario, in many scenarios, this is better because in wartime they're mostly only allowed to use, as far as I know, fully metal jacketed rounds like this. This one happens to be a blunt tip right here. Again, I'm not sure how easily this can be seen. This is considered target ammo around here. You don't really want to carry this most of the time in your weapon for defense. Although I don't think this is really regulated. I mean, you could carry this if you want. Thing with this is, it could, if a shot it misses, this could keep going and more likely hurt someone or break something else. Whereas this, upon hitting a wall, is going to lose a lot more of its energy. As well as hitting a person, this is more likely to cut straight through them and then possibly keep going. Or basically, if it like glides through you real fast, it might not stop you. I mean, obviously you're gonna get shot and it's gonna be bad and it hurts and whatever, but like you might keep going. Whereas this discharges its energy more fully. The energy that's in this piece of metal flying through the air is gonna come to a stop within your body, and it's gonna basically give you all of its energy and wallop you a little harder. But I just think it's funny because I guess this is considered more inhumane, right? Like you wouldn't use this in war because, again, why? Because you're trying to be humane in war, and I don't know. I don't know that this is more inhumane. It's not that this causes more suffering necessarily. I don't know. Like I guess this is more likely maybe to kill you or stop you. But is that a bad thing? Like this, you can almost make the opposite argument. Like I say, this could. If you're trying to kill someone with these, you might slice through them. You might have to shoot someone a lot more with these. And overall, I'm just guessing the experience could end up being more inhumane. So I don't really know what my point is. My point is that all of this is very awkward to think about being humane while shooting people. Like shooting people is not humane and war is not humane, and it's really bad. I mean, it should be avoided is really the main point. So, wow, this is long enough. I've talked enough. I'm sure I've forgotten something. I guess I'll add it on into the comments, into the description if I think of it. But I've made my main points, and hopefully it's made sense. So if you've listened to all this, then thank you very much for listening, and have a good day.